Renee, thank you very much for agreeing to have a chat with me.
It's a pleasure.
As one queer writer to another, thought I'd just do a brief introduction to you, and I'm sure you've heard this many times. Renee is regarded as a living legend at Aotearoa. Born in 1929, making her 91, she is a novelist, poet, playwright and memoirist. She was made an Officer of the New Zealand Order of Merit and has been awarded the Prime Minister's Award for Literary Achievement, the Playmarket Award for Significant Artistic Contribution to New Zealand Theatre, and the Kingi I Haka Award for Service to Toi Māori. Renee has described herself as a lesbian feminist with socialist working class ideals, and her work puts women and the concerns of working class people and Māori centre stage. I am Lil O'Brien. My introduction is very short. I wrote a memoir, Not That I'd Kiss a Girl, which was published this year, and I'm 36 years old, and I describe myself as a really huge lesbian with a passion for lesbian pop culture and being super gay at all times. Renee, it's my honour to get the chance to talk to you today, not only because you're a hugely important person in New Zealand literature, but being able to talk to you as one queer woman to another. So thank you. I think sharing our stories is really important. So I'm going to ask you, I'm going to start with a question that's a bit of a curly one potentially, but answer it as you will. How has your work influenced your identity?
I'm not sure it was the work. The things that have influenced me the most, I guess, were my mother and being taught to work and falling in love with a woman wasn't on my agenda, but that happened, and so I went with that. And then I finished my degree and decided to write seriously. I had been doing little odd bits and pieces which gave way to doing the university degree, and because I finished school when I was 12 because I had to go to work, and so I had always regretted that halt to what I considered would have been good for me, the education. But I did it so that my brother and sister would be able to go to high school, and really it would have been far better for me to go in terms of the benefits, but it didn't happen, and so I did the degree, a very poor one. I just didn't have time. I had 3 teenage sons. I was working in theatre and working in the day as well, but I did it. And so I came to Auckland because I'd fallen in love with a woman, which was really a huge surprise. And I just leapt into the lesbian feminist scene with gay abandon. I just loved it. I loved the freedom, and we used to, have lots of parties and huddle in corners, setting the world to rights.
Wow.
And I was joining a scene that was quite well established in Auckland. I was the newbie.
And what year was that?
That was 1979, 1980.
Okay, yep.
And so I started writing plays, and I got the first script I sent to Mercury they didn't take. They liked it, they said. They didn't have room, but they asked me if I had any more. So I said, yeah, I was writing one, and they said, when would it be finished? And I said, this week. So they said, could they see it? So I said, sure. So I started writing, setting the table, and finished it on Friday. I mean, night and day.
That's crazy. Why did you do that to yourself?
And that was very interesting because they accepted it as for a week, workshop. And they got a director, Mervyn Thompson, and they got a dramaturg from the university, Sebastian Black. And the one thing that I remember about it, because it was good, they worked hard, and nothing much had to be changed. I took out a scene that had a radio voice in it, which was too obviously telling us what was happening, so I had to just fix that up. But otherwise it stayed the way it was. But the director wanted me, there were 4 women, it was about 4 women living in a house in Ponsonby rehearsing a play.
Yeah. And
he wanted me to put a line in that said they were lesbian, that one of them, and I said, no, the audience will know by the other dialogue, and we don't sit around saying, hey, we're lesbians.
I do.
So when I'm with other lesbians.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't seem to
I
be.
mean, it should be conveyed through the
That's
body
right,
language.
yeah. And why
you know,
would you be living with 4 other women
Yeah.
and having lovers and stuff and fighting about things?
Yes.
Or fighting about a principle.
And it's funny if they were, you know, if there was a man and a woman living in
Yeah.
a home, or two
Yes.
men, 2 women, you would assume automatically
Yeah, they were
that they were
heterosexual.
heterosexual.
Yeah,
So why
yeah.
can't we do the same?
Yes, exactly.
I think it's the same.
And I said, I want
now.
people to think that we live and breathe and work and argue and love just like anybody else. See, the
Yeah.
times were different. They're different for you now, but then it was like you were an outcast and that, or someone like, because I just blazoned it to the heavens, because I wasn't scared of anything, and that was because I was 50. Like the 50s are great,
Yeah.
and so I didn't care. So I was the first one to actually say, you know, I'm a lesbian, and you know, so
Wow.
piss off if you don't like it. You know, that's the way it is. And so it got a few headlines and things like that.
Wow.
But I had to learn lots of things were different. Because I was older, other lesbians assumed it was easier. They'd had a lot of hard times that I hadn't had, and often I got knockbacks because they resented that what they saw as my easy run into it, and they can't quite realise, I think, that a lot of what I was like was really due to theatre. You know, I'd worked in theatre for about 25 years, and you tend to get a bit uninhibited and, you know, talk and laugh a lot and be silly and sing and stuff, and drink. And so, like, I wasn't really any different. I was just still me, but I'd found this other thing out about myself. But they saw me, some of them, not all of them, but some of them saw me as creating attention that they perhaps did not like because of their living situation, or I mean, some women had lived together very quietly in the suburbs in a house. They both might have been teachers, or one might have been a teacher and one might have been something else. And they'd lived this life, and they had kind of respect, you know, in the neighbourhood and stuff like that. They didn't want people like me coming and blowing the top off and drawing attention. And of course we did all sorts of silly things, although at the time we thought they were, you know, we were saving the world. Like we freed up bars, you know, the bars used to be just for men only, the public bars, and we sort of waltzed in there in a crowd and ordered a beer and made a general nuisance of ourselves, and we thought we were great, but like the men thought we were crazy.
Was this you with a bunch of other lesbians, or with your theatre? Okay.
No, lesbians, and
I like
they
that.
were feminists, and so we did all those sort of things that were that created a notoriety. And then I wrote a lot of reviews, theatrical reviews. Those are the short pieces of theatre that you have jokes and songs and a little bit of a scene and then more. And I did them around the themes that affected women. Like the first one was called What Did You Do in the War, Mummy? And it was me, I was thinking the war between the sexes. At that time it was fairly blatant. And then I did another one called Asking for It, because that was the thing. If we were ever raped or attacked or anything, we were asking for it because we had short dresses, or we had too much makeup on, or we were walking somewhere we shouldn't be walking, the whole damn 9 yards. And so I did a lot of things. I did a review called the MMP show, and it was menopause, pregnancy, and you know, you bleed every month as well. And so, that's right. And so I created a bit of a stir because of my tendency to, you know, do that. And then we used to do the review, and then we would finish, and there'd be half an hour or something of talk where I would talk, and or we'd sing songs, and it was a lot of fun. It was very tiring, but it created a stir. And then Broadsheet, the feminist magazine, had their 10th anniversary, and they wanted me to tour a play, a review that I'd written, and so we toured all around the country, and that was when I learned I had something to say that people were interested, women were interested in. They came out. It was the best, well, one of the very best experiences of my life. We had no idea what we were doing. We were 6 of us in a van with some guitars and some clothes, and we went to all sorts of places you would not go. You wouldn't do it nowadays because it wouldn't pay, and it didn't pay then, but we didn't know that. So we went to little places and big places. We went to Reefton, and which was in a very poor state at the time, and I was stupid enough to do mixed audience shows and women only shows, and in Reefton we got, I think it was 23 or something women who came on this night and sat in there, and look, it was just like I'd won an Oscar, you know, because in a small place like that, well, I mean, we did the mixed as well, and that was, I think, just about full. But
did it change the performance, do you think, knowing that it was a woman's only?
Yeah, I think in a way, I think it did. And I had this scene. The other cast, the 3 of the cast would be on the stage, and they'd be each side, and they'd say, "Is it a bird? Is it a plane?" And then they say, "No, it's Super Dyke." And out Jess would come, and the audience would just go up. Yeah. And it didn't matter whether they were, the audience was heterosexual or lesbian. They just all loved it. And she would come out and she'd play something on her guitar. And
why do you think that even straight audiences reacted so positively, even in a time when it was alive? Okay.
It was the liveliness, and it was all about women. Like, it wasn't only about lesbian women, it was about all women.
Yeah.
And because not only lesbian women get beaten, not, you know, like there's no, there's no divisions in terms of the treatment that women get. And so, yeah, it was amazing, really. The houses were packed. It was a very, very cold night in Christchurch when we did it here, and we wanted to shut the doors of the hall, and the audience wouldn't let us shut because there were people outside who wanted to hear, even if they couldn't see. And when we went out to do that first scene, there were 4 nuns sitting in the front because one of our members had been taught by one of them, and the others were there, like, because they and I thought, oh Christ. But afterwards they waited. One had been the Reverend Mother in charge of the school, and the other one had been the teacher of one of them, and they waited to say, and the woman who'd been teaching the actor said, "Keep it up." Wasn't that? Because we were talking about rape and stuff like that, and what needed to be done. So that tour convinced me I had something to say.
Yeah.
And from then on, I didn't care about anyone or anything. I just wrote what I wanted. And
so it sounds like your work taught you had something to say, and that influenced your identity.
I think it was the audiences. Oh, well, yes, you're right. In a way, it was the work, because the work appealed to the audiences. It was the right time for someone to come along and say, "Look, I'm sick of all this, you know, other stuff that doesn't give women any space at all." And I mean, I can confidently say I'm probably the first one, I might even be the only one, who's ever talked about how you insert a tampon on stage.
Wow.
And honestly, they would not stop laughing. It was because I was outside smoking. I used to smoke in those days. I was walking up and down, anxious. I get very anxious, and I heard this noise. I didn't really know it was laughing, and I thought, what the hell are they doing? Are they storming the stage or something? and went on and on and on. And the actor told me afterwards she was waiting to say the final line to this little bit.
Yeah.
And she was reading off a paper that you got in with tampons, and the last line was, so insert the tampon, and all she was waiting for was, she had a leg up on the toilet, so she'd followed the instructions, and the women in the audience would not stop laughing, because they all remembered their own experiences. And then it was half time, they finally stopped laughing, and she finally inserted the tampon, and they stopped laughing, and Greg McGee came out. He was another playwright, and he said, don't worry, Renee, you've got them. Which was so nice.
That's amazing. People are just so desperate to see their lives, their real lives represented in all kinds of ways.
And I'm totally sure that no one has ever, and I don't know if they have since either. It was a particular time.
Inserted a tampon on stage?
No.
I mean, I think of the vagina monologues and how popular that was, and that must have tapped into a vein of women wanting to talk about
happened to
things.
look at the little
ago.
piece of paper you got in the thing, and how it was 1, 2, 3, 4, something like that, and it gave you the instructions if you were new to it. So I just recreated this little scene where these 3 girls were very new, very young, and one of them had got her period, and the other 2 were hanging around because they didn't know they hadn't had theirs yet, and so they were all in the toilet, and she was reading the instructions, and it was funny. But on the other hand, it happens to half the population.
I've got a new idea. How about we teach people how to use a dental dam? Because I'm not sure if many lesbians use those. They're horrible things.
Yeah.
So it sounds like, I was going to ask you, one of the questions was, what was your most controversial piece of work? But maybe that you can't really pass one out from your whole body of work.
No. Well, I think all of the reviews were fairly new. I don't think anyone had talked about the medical profession and its attitude to women, it's dealing with women, which was, there's a history of people being just labelled nervous and, dismissed, and that kind of thing, which I don't think anything I did has fixed that, but it certainly opened up the idea that you can discuss anything in a play, and you can, and if you do your homework and do the research, you can do scenes. And I was on a roll anyway, and it was all sorts of fun.
Sometimes it's easier to change minds when you're not directly trying to talk to someone to change minds.
It is. I'm convinced that theatre is one of those places where you can, if not change, at least make people think just by the way you present a performance. And because I was directing them as well, we could do whatever I wanted, and it was a good kind of thing, the review, because it wasn't really like a play. It was just kind of couple of skits and music in between and all that sort of thing. So you could do it, and I got a group of women who were very talented and hardworking. And we all believed in what we were doing. Did
you ever have a bad reaction from an audience, or what was kind of the no? Have you ever had any serious backlash from any of your work?
Yeah, but that was when Mervyn got attacked, and they blamed me. But that wasn't really, that was because I'd written Setting the Table, and that was simply because they weren't able to find out who did it, and so I had written the play which had a scene in it like that, and so I was obviously to blame. And but that was really just, they were desperate to find someone to blame. So but apart from that, I've had nothing but good feedback, and particularly from women, but a lot from men as well. And then I wrote Wednesday to Come, which appealed to everyone, and so so I've been very lucky,
Yes.
and then I started writing fiction. It was, my first. I don't know if I was the first ever to have lesbian protagonists in a novel. I feel like I was, but I don't think I was. I can't prove it. There must have been women before me who wrote
What year
about
was
it.
that?
1989. Willy-nilly came out. Penguin published it.
Yeah.
Um,
I remember, I think, outside of New Zealand, there was The Price of Salt, wasn't there? With
yes, outside.
Patricia
Yes, I
Highsmith.
don't mean.
You mean within New Zealand?
I mean within
New
New
Zealand.
Zealand.
I guess I'm thinking about how that was considered the first ever lesbian novel with a happy ending in 1968, I think it was.
Yeah.
Whether it was a happy ending.
Is a moot.
She did kind of lose her children. Spoiler
Yes.
alert, sorry. Go watch the movie Carol, read the book.
Yes.
But it's not to say that was the beginning of happy endings, was it? For
and I'm a fan of happy endings.
Me too.
I like happy endings.
Yeah.
So most of my books, well, all of them so far, have had happy endings. And also, why do lesbians not have to have happy endings?
I know.
Like, why do they have to have sad ones? Is what I think.
Yeah. I think you can trace it back to certain reasons. There was the Hays Code, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Back in Hollywood, where we weren't really allowed to have happy endings. They had to regret and take back, give penance or whatever.
Well, and it was the same for men as well,
Yes.
Terrible stories of men being imprisoned or forced to take drugs and stuff.
Do you, when you wrote a memoir later, this was after you'd done theatre and fiction and things, is there a happy ending to your memoir? And how do you write a happy ending in a memoir when your life's still going?
Well,
I'd quite like to know that too.
No. But you can be living a happy, fulfilled sort of life. And while it never entered my head I'd live this long, here I am, and I'm doing exactly what I want to do. I can't see very well, but excuse me, I'm just going to.
Sure.
But everyone gets something, and but I can still work. I've got this big screen linked to a Mac Pro with big type on it, and so I can still work. What more can I want? And I have friends. I was very intelligent, shall I say, or just happened to be old. And when I went to Auckland, I was 50, and I was a lot older than a lot of other lesbians that became friends. So now that I am old, they're not really old at all. Like, they're in their 60s and 70s.
Yes.
So I've still got those people in my life.
Yeah.
And
I think it's really important. I went and spoke at the Auckland Lesbian Business Association a couple of weeks ago, ALBA. And, lots of the women there are in their 80s, 70s and 80s, and I always had seen them as quite intimidating. But it was just so rewarding. And they talked about how they said, one of them said that she thought it was harder for queer women now, which was quite surprising to me, because obviously things weren't as acceptable back in the day. But she said at the time we had a community and we all hung out together and we stuck together, and now I see young people that don't have a community and are searching for that, and that was really interesting to me.
It is, yeah. When in the 80s we were looking for older. We couldn't find really many older ones, but there were two in Wellington. And we came down from Auckland to meet them. Yeah. They were in their late 70s, I think, and they'd been together for about 40 years or so. It was a very special kind of visit, because there were just none around, and now there's quite a few of us, I think.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful, the way it was like you had a connection before you even had met people. And it makes me think of, because I'm quite a connector in my group of friends, that when people are moving back from overseas, their friend might go, "Oh, I've got a lesbian friend, Lil. You should meet her." Yes. And so we'll go and meet this person, just to kind of give them like a soft landing with other, people who are queer like them, and that's kind of cute as well, I think. And there is that thing that bonds us together, sometimes for better or worse, I think. For me, it took a while to find I call it my queer posse of my really great friends.
Oh, I think you're right.
You know.
I mean, it's just because one's a lesbian doesn't mean every other lesbian's going to be beautiful and wonderful and your friend. No, it doesn't mean that at all. It often means you can disagree and get told off. And I mean, I got told off for wearing lipstick in the 80s. And I just said, well...
Yeah. When I tell a story in my memoir about when I first came out. I was at Otago University in 2004. So I was 19, sorry. And I went down, they had a monthly queer night at the university bar, underground, and I went down the stairs and the bouncer stopped me and said, "You do know what's going on down there, don't you?" And I was like, very taken aback. I knew what he meant. But he was looking at me because I was wearing, a pencil skirt and high heels and long hair and dangly earrings. And so I was like, yes, and kind of scuttled down the stairs. But then when I got down and I went and said hello to, the lesbian soccer team was how I figured to get in, get friends. And I said, oh my God, the bouncer just, stopped me and said, do you know pretty much there are gay people down there? And they were like, yeah, because you look too straight.
Yeah, I know, it's a funny thing.
So you kind of get it from all angles. There's a lot of prejudice within our community.
There is.
As well.
And it just doesn't pay to take any notice at all. I just don't. I never have. No, it's like life's too short.
Yes. Apart from when you need to stand up for other people.
Oh, you have to do that.
Yes.
I mean, whoever they are, whatever they think, you have to be there with them. Oh, yes, I totally agree. And they, if they've got any gumption, should be there with you when you need it too.
Yes.
But yes, but you can disagree. Yeah.
Yes. I was going to ask you. It sounds like what was your journey to coming out? Well, it sounds like it was you fell in love with someone, and did you kind of just burst out of the closet in your personal life and professionally with what you were writing at the same time and in that world?
It took a little while actually because I didn't really believe it, and so I had to tell my husband and leave. And I've written a little scene in the memoir what happened, but once I made up my mind, I didn't really look back. It wasn't. And I didn't really fly into the new relationship instantly.
Well, we took a flat. First time a lesbian has not done that.
We took a flat, and it was a 2-bedroom flat.
Okay. We
had separate rooms for a while, and then we shared a room, and it was, and I was happy.
Yeah.
It was, and I met this other bunch of lesbians, and I was totally happy to be in that milieu, and I think that was a surprise to be overcome by this happy feeling.
Yes.
And
were you writing lesbian characters in your work by then?
I had really not written anything but little short pieces for newspapers or reviews, book reviews. So what I started, first thing I did write was, no, it wasn't. The first thing I wrote was a compilation of work, of songs and speeches from plays by Noel Coward and Gertrude Lawrence. And someone I knew who was a drama student was going to do the play for her end of year final exam, and so we jacked up the guy to play Noel Coward. She was going to do Gertrude Lawrence. I was going to direct it, and she was going to do it for the drama teachers and whatever. And then I got chickenpox, and so I couldn't do it. So that was actually the script I sent to Mercury. Initially, and which they didn't want. They said that they were too full. They said it was lovely, but they were too full, which everyone says when they don't want something. But that was when they asked me if and then that play, Setting the Table, was all women. And it was a lot of stuff that I'd thought about, rape and things like that.
Yeah.
So that was probably the first one.
Yeah.
Up until then, I didn't consider myself a writer anyway. I just diddled about a bit, but really I was too busy studying and I was teaching, and that's a full-time job.
It can be quite hard to accept the title of writer. I found that personally.
Yes, it does seem a bit kind of like you're being a bit arrogant.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Yes, because it seems such a big thing to say, and you're writing these. But once, I certainly wanted to write plays, and I wanted to be regarded as a good playwright, and but I still wanted to have women centre stage. So, and I had enough willpower and determination at that stage to do it.
Yeah.
And I had nothing to lose. I couldn't get a job in Auckland. I was too old at 50 to be considered.
Yeah.
Someone told me that when I applied for a job. So I did cleaning. I cleaned toilets and theatres and stuff just to get a bit of money to eat. And
So it kind of sounds like you're falling in love with a woman and finding other lesbian friends, kind of like, it almost sounds like it gave you like this great, amongst your happiness, that you kind of, it really sparked something in you that you started writing seriously.
I don't know. I don't know which came first, but certainly one fed into the other.
Yeah.
Oh yes, and I'm pretty sure if I hadn't stepped out, I'd never have written the plays and things that I wrote. I just lost all fear.
Yeah.
And I did not care anymore about what people said. I got dropped by everybody. Everyone who'd been my friend before, or thought they were, except for one woman, bless her. Everyone else dropped me. They made a point of it, and so I could have been quite alone, but I wasn't, of course.
That's actually got some parallels with me, because when I kind of went through quite a process of coming out, and I did a lot of research quite methodically, library books, and I finally found a coming out group, and then I went overseas and I tried out being, openly bisexual at the time over there. And then I came back, right, I'm ready to do this. And I came back to Otago University and I came out to all my friends. It was very triumphant, and I felt so heady with power. And I was like, oh, I'm gay. And it was just really in the forefront of my mind, and I dared anyone to give me shit about it. And I felt very, very powerful. But then I accidentally outed myself to my parents a few months later. And they really, they didn't react well. We lost our relationship and they told me to get out. But it was almost like I was so full of my own personal power at that time, and so happy with having found that queer identity, that yes, it was devastating, but it just kind of, I didn't want to let it stop me, and I felt like the most authentic version of myself, and that's really powerful, I think.
Did they come round, or?
In some ways, we just never talked about it. That's the problem.
No,
we haven't talked about it for 16 years. No. And they did eventually meet my girlfriend after we'd been dating for 6 years. And then they thought everything was okay because they'd met her and they liked her. But for me, having never acknowledged all the ways that I was silenced and had to be the perfect daughter around them and not bring up controversial topics, it was just, I didn't like having to be, a black and white version of myself. And then I published a book about it and I blew them all out of the water. So you just,
Well, my brother and sister were really, given that they were, kind of, we're all working class sort of people and stuff, it didn't make any difference at all. They didn't really go overboard or anything. Just nothing changed. I was still welcome at the house and all that sort of thing. And my uncle, who was a Second World War veteran, and that he just changed. Like he used to always send me a card every Christmas to Renee and to my husband's name, and then he just next Christmas he just put Renee and Bernadette, and as though like it was the easiest thing.
That's wonderful.
He was such a sweetheart.
Yeah.
And and when I went to when he was 82, he invited me to his birthday. No, 80, I mean, and he had me sit up at the top of the table by him, and people are just different, aren't they? You'd have thought a man of his generation would be the first one to go, no thanks, but he wasn't, and he always liked me. He was very fond of me, and he was very good to me, because I mean everyone knows my father shot himself, so I just didn't have he was the male figure in the family really, and he was only young when I was young, about 17 when his brother did that, and so I had and I didn't see I didn't care about the Christmas cards, not getting them and stuff. I just did not care, and so in a way I had a bit of a dream run. I got a bit, of flack from other lesbians who wanted me to change and not wear lipstick and all that kind of thing. But
isn't that an unusual story? You didn't get too much flack from the wider world, but you got it from other.
Well, because I was who I was,
yeah.
and because I wouldn't shut up.
Yes.
And I was out on the streets doing all sorts of shouty things and shouting out about rape and stuff like that, and the sentences that were given, which were laughable, and they still are. And I mean, I didn't win anything. I wanted to make the streets safe. Yeah. But I haven't succeeded in that. We didn't succeed in that, and but it was.
I'm sure that you.
I think I do understand. I do understand that there were lesbians who had spent their whole lives living this quiet life, building up a kind of thing for the neighbours. I do understand they didn't want me lipstick and all belting into their.
You think there's a fear because they'd kind of made a protected life.
They had
built the walls around.
And I do understand that. At the time, I just thought, oh well, up you. Like if you don't like. Well, I don't care. Now I'm far, far more understanding. Yes. I do see. Yeah. And also now I've got another kind of take as well, because I'm old, and it seems to me that not a lot of people, they just disregard you. If because I can just walk up the street or live at home or whatever. No one knows who I am or anything. And so I get treated just like any other old person, and sometimes it's not pleasant. They just, you just don't figure on their lexicon of people who matter, and so there's that. But yeah.
Do you know what you're just going back to what you're saying about the way you live versus some other lesbians? It's kind of like, it sounds like you had a version of pride, which is a concept being like attached to the LGBT community that is so intertwined with the LGBT community now, like pride with the pride parade.
It is.
But it wasn't really a thing. That wasn't a thing.
Of course, they were. It was the times.
Yeah.
Like men could be arrested, and women, if they thought they were, police were horrible. Horrible. They would pick up women they thought were lesbians for no reason whatsoever, and they would be strip searched and humiliated. I don't blame the lesbians who thought I had a big mouth and should shut up. I don't blame them at all, because they had lived a life for a long, long time before I bounced into it. Yeah. And
they're trying to stay safe.
And they wanted to be safe, and they thought I was making them unsafe. And I was totally heedless of that. I had until I got a bit into the community and thought about it a bit more. Of course I then did. But at first it was all so wonderful, and I just didn't care, and da-da-da-da-da. Yeah. And you could really, there's something to be written about that now, now that we're safer perhaps. I'm not sure about that now. People can still be attacked, and that's simply because they are lesbian. Some men still think one good fuck, and she'll know the difference. there's a mindset that's still there.
Yeah.
And
I think I can see that attitude still now, whereas like people are still coming out later in life at the in 2020, and I guess I can see that feeling of, well, I had to come out when I was a teenager and I had to go through all this stuff and we weren't as accepted back then, and then here you are, you've had heterosexual privilege your whole life, and now you're coming out at
that's
age
what they said to me,
35 or 40 or whatever, and you didn't have to deal with all the shit that we had to deal with. So I can kind of understand that mentality, but I guess you just want that person to appreciate, that it's not easy for everyone, but it doesn't really help anyone to kind of butt heads about that.
No, and of course you're full of joy and power and everything, and they think, just shut up and go away from me.
I've definitely had a few times in my life like, Lil only cares about gay things. Like, well, why do you always talk about gay things? You don't understand how it still feels exciting for me to be able to talk about gay things. To be sitting in a cafe outside on the street and to be talking loudly about being a lesbian. That is just so exciting still. And I said that once, that it still feels like a privilege. And my therapist actually said it's not a privilege, it's a right. Okay, I'm going to ask you 2 more questions because we could just chat forever, I think. You said in an interview for The Hui in 2018, writing has been a great source of joy and irritation and anger and total pleasure. You've also said that writing is instinctive to you and is coming home. So I wanted to ask, do you think that writing is always intensely personal or vulnerable, no matter what the subject matter is?
Oh yes, because you're sticking yourself on the line, aren't you?
Yes.
Oh yes.
No matter what, if you're writing fiction or whatever.
Exactly. Even if you're just writing a little piece that might appear to be mundane about some little thing they might have asked you to do for the local paper or something like that, it's not the same. You don't feel quite as strongly, but you're still putting yourself out there, and it's a very risky business. But it's not something I'd stop. It's the fear of what people might say is not as strong as wanting to do it and knowing that I am going to do it. And just
I like
to hell with everyone.
Knowing that you are going to do it. I felt the same. I've been asked a few times, and I think memoir writers get asked a lot. How do you deal with you're writing about real people, hurting other people's feelings? And I'd say the best advice I ever heard was wait until they're dead. But if you don't have that, I think I actually was never really worried about. I was worried about hurting other people, but I was actually never worried about putting myself out there, telling my own stories and the ways I was a mess or did bad things. And ultimately, like in publishing my memoir, I knew that it would be really bad for my relationship with my parents. But I just knew. I also knew that I was going to do it, no matter what.
I really only treated my sons in the book their years when they were little. I didn't speak much about them when they were older because I figured that was their lives. But one of them said to me, really just recently, how glad he was what I'd written about his father. And I don't know whether he thought I was going to be horrible or what. I suppose he could have thought that. But he said it was great the way you wrote about Dad in the book, and so that was very pleasing because I didn't make out he was like a hero or anything like that. But the little scene in the book where I'm leaving, and he's sitting there is although I say it that shouldn't, it's quite a good scene, and so it was really good to hear his son say thanks for that. And although that wasn't in my mind when I wrote it, of course, I just was writing what I saw as the truth. But that's so, and they'd be the only ones I care about. I don't care about what people think and I mean I've had some terrible things said when I was younger, but I don't care.
Mm.
I really don't care. I think once I made the decision, it was so out of left field that nothing seemed ever as bad or as big a step.
Yeah.
And so if people, and I've always had a bit of a big mouth and always, you know, sort of called lippy because I talked about things and or resented things. And I'm in a generation where women didn't. And so when they struck one who did, they just didn't like it at all. So I probably had a big mouth before I came out as a lesbian anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it sounds like, going back to the first question, that your identity, not as necessarily as a queer woman, but just your very personhood,
Yes.
who you are, your personality, influenced your work a lot of it.
Yes.
And
yeah.
the need to
Yeah.
do that kind of
And
work.
also not being scared to speak out about what I saw. It was, and finding other women who were like that as well was such a huge joy.
Yes.
And you would find that too. It's
I feel like I can breathe.
That's right.
Properly.
Exactly right. That is exactly the right thing to say. At last, you can breathe. Yeah. That's
beautiful.
absolutely true.
Final question is, what is your hope for the LGBTQIA plus community?
I want them to grow and thrive and be happy. I just want them to be happy. And I know that some people have got huge hurdles, and I know that they get a lot of shit and that, but just when that happens, just think of me. I'm in the little wee place in Otaki, and I just think they're fabulous.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes me emotional. Thank you, Renee.
A great pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.